You mentioned not needing motivation. In fact, I think you wrote that motivation was a sign of a non-resilient mind. But there's maybe some nuance between motivation and inspiration.
Yes.
Can you tell me what the difference is?
Yes. I define inspiration as an intrinsic drive, and motivation is an extrinsic. I'll use the analogy of a kid who likes video games. You know, you don't have a mother that says, "Now, Johnny, um, stop doing your homework and do that darn video game." The child spontaneously inspired to do the video game. It identifies itself as a video master, but you're going to have to motivate it with reward and punishment to get the chores, homework, and cleaning the room. So you'll say to Johnny, "Now you can't play your video game until you get your homework done. When you get your homework done, you can play." So you'll be punished by not getting to play the video games until your homework's done, and you'll be rewarded once your homework's done. So you're using an extrinsic motivation to try to, on top of an intrinsic drive, which is doing the video games. But the intrinsic drive is spontaneous. He doesn't need to be motivated from external purposes to do that. And many people are going through life and living in needs of external motivation, and their need to be pushed uphill all the time instead of having an intrinsic drive. And inspiration is intrinsic and motivation is extrinsic. Some people call intrinsic motivation inspiration. That's all. They just give it that term. But I've been observing that since I was 23 and watching the people who excelled versus the people who are constantly running up into snags and obstacles. And the reason why we run into snags and we need motivation, outside motivation, is because we're trying to be somebody we're not. We're trying to do something that other people want us to do instead of being who we are. I was just having a meeting last night with two lovely gentlemen I met at the club lounge at this hotel I'm at. And he says they do motivational presentations. And I kind of resonated with him and chatted with him. I'm not a motivational speaker. I try to find out what intrinsically drives people and help them discover that so they don't require motivation. But these guys were trying to use rhetorical persuasion, as kind of a sophistry, if you will, on the clients in their audience in order to get them to purchase the product they were doing. So they were sales guys. And I'm not the greatest sales guy. I'm an educator, but I sell a little bit on the side, but it's not my focus. I'm more of an educator. But these guys, they have to make a living through sales. So they have to make sure that those people are persuaded to buy that product or they're out of business. I'm not in that situation so much, but it was interesting. I said, how many people buy back after the cooling period, 2 or 3 days later? Do they ever ask for their money back? He says, yeah, we get quite a bit of that. I said, that's because you transiently motivated them and gave them pleasure of buying your product and pain if they don't. But hedonic adaptation neutralizes that and they go back to a set point, and then the intrinsic motivation, their inspirations take over again, what's truly important to them. And then they realize that that's not really what was important to them. And then they end up bailing out on you. And then they don't have the consistency to apply what you've just taught them. And they said, yeah, it's frustrating because then you have to push these people uphill. I said, maybe there's a way of selecting and having fewer buybacks and selecting more congruently if you know what the people's values are. And maybe you can get maybe you get a little less in sales, but you have less buybacks and you have a much more inspiring outcome with people getting the results. So I had a conversation. I'm going to meet with them today after our podcast and have a conversation because they hadn't really thought along those lines. But intrinsic motivation or inspiration is far greater in outcome and achievement. You know, when you went through what you went through, it wouldn't be just external motivation to get you through it. There's no way. That by itself, somebody might be able to kick your butt a bit, but you had to have some intrinsic drive to want to be able to allow whatever's happened in your journey to go and do something you wanted to do. You couldn't have had it, but if you were sitting there uninspired from within, somebody telling you what to do would not be sufficient. But you had some sort of inner drive, inner will, a vision, inside vision. I'm a firm believer when the voice and the vision on the inside is louder than the opinions on the outside, you master the game. Nothing stops you. It all becomes on the way, not in the way. And you take whatever happens to you and you turn it into an opportunity. That's it. My speech impediment and my speaking and my reading, all those became catalyst. I mean, I've read 31,000 books now. So I was told I would never read. I'm 31,000. So I'm a reader every single day. So, and most people don't have the drive to do that. That's not important enough for them, but it was for me.